Hey, I hope you are feeling unwell today. Remember this game? That's right, it's everyone's favorite, Dead Space. Wait, that's not Dead Space, that's the Netflix adaptation of Dead Space. Released on December 2nd, 2022, just in time for Santa to gift it to all the little kids on the nice list, the Callisto Protocol didn't make waves quite like its very clear inspiration, Dead Space, and I found that it was generally forgotten about after the first week of its release by most people. I never played it when it first came out, but it recently dropped on Game Pass, so I figured, hey, why not give it a whirl? Maybe it's just really underappreciated and not the extreme mid that the general audience claimed it was. The game intrigued me back when it was first announced. I think it looks really fucking good visually, and sci-fi horror is always awesome. So here's what I thought of the Callisto Protocol. The game starts off on a big ol' spaceship and introduces us to these guys. Our main character Jacob and his co-pilot and good friend Max. Our two new pals are space truckers who are making a highly classified delivery of something presumably dangerous when they suddenly get attacked by space pirates led by this Miss Lady, Danny. Remember that name because she's gonna become more relevant later on. Or don't. I'm not your dad. The space pirates force our ship to crash into a planet/moon, and then we get imprisoned by a prison warden into Blackrock Prison alongside Danny. Oh yeah, and Max receives the same fate as Gus Fring when the ship crashes. The prison gets overrun by a bunch of angry monsters, and our main character, understandably, doesn't want any part of this. I don't want to recite the story in detail, so I'll just go over some quick thoughts I have on it. First off, I'd like to say that I love the concept of the setting. Having to escape a sci-fi prison that's overrun by monsters is really cool, and I just keep thinking back to the UC Vanguard questline of Starfield and what could have been had Bethesda actually made design documents for that game instead of just throwing shit at a wall and praying it works. While Jacob and Danny hate each other's guts at the beginning of the game for obvious reasons, they predictably begin to get friendly and rely on one another to escape the prison. While I don't mind their relationship being overly generic, it feels really off pace. And I'm not exaggerating, Danny hates Jacob in one scene, and I kid you not, 5 minutes later, they seem like they've been friends for months.
So,
Don't fucking talk to me.
what's your problem?
Just stop. We're almost there. Jacob! Take my hand! Jacob!
It feels like the studio didn't know how to progress their relationship more slowly and naturally, so they kind of just hit you with these guys, they fucking hate each other. Nah, they're cool. Jacob and Danny escape the prison, but they can't get off the planet because their ship gets blown up, so they decide to re-enter the prison and solve the mystery of this monster outbreak. Spoiler alert for the ending, we find out that the monsters are all actually ex-prisoners of Blackrock Prison, and a science team was experimenting on creating superhumans with them, basically. Really generic shit. And I won't spoil how exactly the game ends, but I will say that it seems like they're desperately trying to set up a sequel, which I really don't like. Like, this is a brand new IP, very clearly inspired by a much more established game franchise. You must have a whole lot of audacity to intentionally try to set up a sequel. One more thing, and this isn't necessarily bad, but I noticed that the Callisto Protocol has absolutely zero comedic moments. Like, not a single joke is ever uttered. It's like just about boring politics and boring science the whole way through. Science is cool, actually. Who am I kidding? Anyway, that's just an observation I made about the tone of the game. Let's talk about how this game looks. Like I mentioned before, the Callisto Protocol is absolutely stunning. It was made in Unreal Engine 4, which I was quite surprised by because it is so pretty. The lighting is amazing, and mix that in with the different levels that are in the game, and oh my god, I love games that have great lighting and are also set in very metallic settings, because that's when you truly get to see all those reflections. And I don't even know if this game has ray tracing, but if it does, I can't even imagine how good that looks. I played on the Xbox Series S, by the way, and the game still managed to look this good on that piece of shit. Really great atmosphere from this game for sure. A lot of the areas in the game I found to look unique, and they were also so good looking, as you can see here. The Callisto Protocol even features sweat rolling off our main character Jacob's face. The only problem is that he's this sweaty throughout the entire 8 hours of the game. I guess he was just really nervous. Hey, don't laugh at him. If you were the main character, you'd have piss-stained details on your pants. The Callisto Protocol was developed by Striking Distance Studios, which is quite fitting because the entire gameplay loop is that you need to be within striking distance of these monsters in order to beat them to a pulp. Basically, the combat in this game is centered around meleeing enemies, and I think there's pros and cons to this decision from the devs. The melee combat, while simple, is actually very fun, with a big focus on dodging enemy attacks and then slamming them with some heavy fucking hitters. The combat has a lot of weight to it. You can really feel the impact when you bash an enemy in the face with a metal pipe.
Please stop hitting my ribcage with a metal bar. Ouchie! Yikes!
I could totally see this exact gameplay mechanic working really well in a different genre of game. Why do I say that? Well, it's because an atmospheric survival horror game doesn't really work with a melee-centric combat system, with which you go right up to these creatures you're meant to deeply fear, and you start fucking beating them. It gives too much power to the player, and not enough to the creatures that are meant to make this a horror game. I'm someone who's very prone to being scared when playing a horror game.
Some people really have nothing better to do. Wait,
True.
I bet it was these guys.
What the fuck? I normally take my time with creeping around rooms, actually being terrified of what's around the corner. The Callisto Protocol is the first horror game where I felt nothing. I'm not kidding you, I did not feel any emotion during the entirety of the game. I sprinted more than I walked or jogged because I knew that whatever was around that corner, chances were I could probably KO them. It's a very strange approach for a horror game to allow you to fist fight the things that are meant to stalk you from the shadows and be lethal if they get too close to you. In Resident Evil, for instance, if you keep missing your shots and an infected gets too close to you, it tends to put you in a little quick time event where you fight for your life. The Callisto Protocol encourages you to get close to the infected because that's when you're most in control. You are provided with a few guns, but what's the point of using them and risking the chance of missing your shots when you could instead mostly guarantee your victory by just engaging in close quarters combat? There was just absolutely no tension or initiative to have a different playstyle, and the combat is pretty damn easy once you've got the hang of it. The only time it can get tricky is if you're surrounded by a large group of enemies, because the developers clearly had one-on-one combat in mind when they designed the system. The camera won't really understand who to lock onto sometimes because it tries to stay cinematic, and the combat does look really good when you're just fighting one enemy, but all that cinema is ruined when it starts having a seizure if there's multiple enemies and it doesn't know who to show. Another time when the combat can get tricky is if you're fighting in the middle of some stairs or a slope or ramp or something. I guess because the game expects you to fight your enemies on equal level ground, so when there's a difference in your Y coordinates, your character will keep missing their hits, which isn't meant to happen. There is a stealth mechanic that's underutilized for 70% of the game and then overutilized near the end for an entire chapter. There's not much to say about the stealth, it's just your typical sneak behind enemy and then press button to subdue enemy. There's also a gauntlet that the game gives you which allows you to use the force, but it is probably the most nothing boring burger mechanic in the entire game, so I don't even want to talk about that. The level design is decent, I didn't really get lost too many times, and there's plenty of opportunities to stray off the beaten path for optional stuff if you're into that. What I didn't like is how the Callisto Protocol features an actual fuck ton of crawling through vents or squeezing through cracks sequences. This is most likely done to mask loading screens, but there is probably one of these sequences every 3 to 5 minutes of playing throughout the entire game. I'm not normally too bothered by shit like that, but even for me, this was really distracting and throwing off the pacing of the game. The newer Last of Us games are the perfect example of integrating loading screens naturally into the game.
Hey, that round building. It looks like the TV station from your map.
Yeah. Come on.
And the Callisto Protocol is the worst example of it. I firmly believe that we should leave the last gen consoles behind by now, because what the fuck are we doing here? I got a PS5 with the promise of next gen gaming, and I'm not seeing it in a lot of new releases yet. It's pathetic. I enjoyed some things about the Callisto Protocol, like how good it looks and the really fun combat, but the story wasn't paced well, the characters were uninteresting, and the horror aspect was just not there for me. This game is ultra mid, and I don't see myself ever revisiting it. They do expect players to replay because there's a DLC and different game modes they've added in, so if you've enjoyed the game, there's more content there for you luckily. Now here's a fun raccoon fact. They are supposedly great swimmers. They're probably actually swimming around in the pipes in your walls as we speak. See ya.